Good morning. I'm very sporty today, looking very sporty. Been out enjoying the weather. What are we at? 24 Celsius. Um, it's not like proper Aussie hot summer hot, but it's just. I was sitting out there this morning. I looked at it and went, I do not want to go and just sit in front of the computer right now. I want to go out to the beach and have a little walk. Now here we are. So good morning. Doing something different. Home theatre. Jeez. Hmm. Um, let's jump straight into it, and I'll recap on how we got to this point. Last week, I was talking about IoT switches, and I was talking about the physical switches being the ones on the walls, obviously, and using the Shelly IoT units that sit behind them to do all the automation bits. Morning, Simon. Thanks for joining. And I was explaining that I'm looking at all of this again freshly now, in part because I think 88 units that I have in this house that I've put in over the last 5 years. Sometimes I fail. I'm trying to figure out how do I get more reliability. The Shelly dimmers are just a little bit flaky sometimes. Shelly dimmer 2, there's a 3 coming out, which I think will fix everything, I hope. The switches, the Clipsal Saturn Zen switches are absolute crap. I'm making that decision in this house. But I also explained that I moved in this house 10 years ago, and we have just bought the property next door, and we're going to build out. Like, we're going to actually build a whole bunch of new stuff. And that means a lot of IoT things. And it also means we've got this really, really cool, I guess, opportunity where we're looking at it and going, well, we really love this house. There are certain things we wanted. We wanted more space for various things. But now, given the opportunity, like, what would we actually build? And we kind of went, okay, well, let's not replicate things that we have already. What are things that we don't have that would be really cool? And one of the first things that came up, and this is not uncommon in this area as well, is to have a dedicated home theatre. And then things have started escalating out of control, as they are prone to do. Anyone who's done any sort of renovations or building before knows that things escalate out of control. Anyone who's done any tech things at all knows they escalate out of control. Anyone who's done any home automation in particular knows that things get out of control really quickly. So here's how it's getting out of control, like in a fun, geeky way. What's a home theatre? Okay, like a dumb question. Many times it is a room that someone turns into a place with a projector and some cool audio. And we've sort of done this downstairs. We've got an area down there that was always a TV room, and we had the TV that is now up on my wall with all the fancy Haverbean phonographs, 77-inch. You used to sit there on the wall. I have the one thing that I still have from the 90s is the first thing I ever bought when I first made some money was really cool audio gear. I've got Crix speakers. Now, Crix is an Aussie brand. You may not have heard of overseas. Really good stuff. I've got great big sort of yay high. So for those of you listening later on, I'm gesturing at about the 120 centimeter height. Putting that out there in front and a nice center and a couple of rears and a good sub, and the sound is good. And then we decided to get a projector. I'm just looking at James' comment here. How big a projector? Because TV is 100-inch now. Yeah, a lot bigger than that. We'll get to that. We got the big projector, which, how wide is that projector? Now, keeping in mind that I'm from pretty much anywhere in the world that isn't America, so I'm not quite sure how big an inch is. But it must be, I don't know what it is diagonally, the one we have at the moment. Multiple meters, I guess. We basically went, here's the wall, just fill the wall with screen. So, and we got a projector that I think it probably cost about the same as what I paid for my first plasma TV. Like, not nuts. Certainly not by today's standards. So that room has been great. And, we'll go in there and we've got curtains that close and doors that close, and you make it dark and the home automation sets movie time. And it's lovely, but it's not designed for that. And it's a room that is a thoroughfare we come and go from. When you look at a home theatre, and this is where we start getting into the, like, how carried away can we get here? There's a couple of different options. So many people will have a room in the house that they turn into a theatre. It's an existing room. It's a normal room. 4 walls, ceiling, roof, doors, all the obvious stuff. We have them here in Australia too. James is 100 inches, 2.5 meter. Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, it's bigger than that. I don't have, I can't remember what it is. It's the full wall. So continuing on this train of thought, yeah, many people are retrofitting into an existing room, and then there's, I guess, varying degrees that they might go to. You know, do they go like James's route and get a 100-inch monster, LED style TV, or do they get a projector, whack some speakers on the wall, nice environment, looks great. Now, that's not what I was thinking originally, because I was like, okay, if we have all of this space to build, and this is about a 730 square meter block. Sorry, James, I don't know what that is in inches, mate, or feet or whatever. Same size as the block we have at the moment. But one of the cool things is when you combine two blocks, you actually more than double the space, because you get the boundaries back in the middle. So I'm not sure what the legal width of a boundary is. I think it's about 2 meters here. James, that's some number of feet. And you get it on both sides. And now where you normally have to leave space between the house and the dividing wall, which is, or dividing fence, now you've got all this space back. So we got this huge amount of space. And it's like, well, if we're building something, what do you build? Like, if you have the freedom to say, let us build a room whose sole purpose is going to be a theatre. We've already got a nice, comfy lounge TV area and all the other things. Like, if you've got, that's the sole purpose, what do you build? So, because this is such a major project for us, not only are we doing that, but we're renovating a bunch of other things here in the existing house. We have a project manager who went out. Well, actually, we have a project manager who I said, I don't know a lot about home theatres, but I know enough to know that there's a huge amount of science to it and stuff that I don't understand and you've probably never heard of. So can you find, like, who are the firms that do good home theatre stuff in our little corner of the world here? It is a dedicated discipline. I know that we need someone who lives and breathes this stuff, because if we're going to build it from scratch, and I guess that the level that we're trying to get this place to, like, we're going to need someone specialist. So, see if I can find this guy. Who was these guys yesterday? Multiple hours later, what's the name of this company? I was literally there yesterday. Multiple hours later, after, like, we spent, I think, almost 3 hours at this place yesterday. Be my Waze history. What was it? The digital picture. That's what I'm after. All right. Digital picture. Oh my. Here you go. I'll drop this in the chat, and then folks watching along at home can see what I'm sort of talking about. So I went and visited these folks, and they'd won a whole bunch of awards for home theatres. Like, we knew this beforehand. So, all right, cool, that's what we want. We want people that are very well recognised, this sort of thing. And I'm having a look at some of the stuff they've done, and it's like, oh wow, I've still got my sound on. So that's really, really cool. And then we got there and we realised how little I knew about everything, and I almost don't know where to start with this. I will start from scratch. I said a lot of people have a room that they turn into the home theatre. And I mentioned that there are already walls in this room. We have those in Australia too. That's the way it works. Ceiling doors, all the rest of it. If you're building from scratch and you're going, not completely, let me qualify by completely overboard. When we were traveling recently, I download a lot of YouTube and I just watch a whole bunch of stuff while I'm on the plane. I don't have the attention span for a lot of movies. And I downloaded a bunch of home theatre stuff, and I was watching some of the really high-end stuff from a company in the US. And one of the ones they'd built was an $800,000 theatre. Now, there's no way in the world where you're going to spend anything like that. But the point I'm trying to make is that this is how carried away people can get. Now, that is not just the audio, but the fit out and all the acoustic stuff and the construction of the room and the air conditioning and the rack and like a gazillion different things that go into this very, very specialized room. So you can go to this extraordinarily extreme point. Now, in Aussie dollars, that's more than $1 million, which is pretty nuts. So that's the kind of extreme end. What we started learning yesterday is that if you're building this from scratch, even the design of the room has got fundamentally different characteristics to a normal room. So for example, I said, well, look, what we would normally do is effectively build a room inside a room. Like the walls have special, or the plasterboard or whatever it is, special fixtures that hang on the timber so that they're acoustically sound or don't resonate or something like this. Like, don't even get all the details. As it starts to get built, I'll get photos and I'm sure it'll make more sense. But the way you hang the walls, the plaster is going to be different. The ratio of the width and the length, of course, is going to be very specific. The way that the platform raises, if you have like 2 rows of seats, and if you're looking at the website that I just put in the chat, you'll see that that's pretty normal. You have like, maybe 4 at the front and 4 at the back sort of thing. And then, of course, all the material that goes onto the walls. And one of the things the guy was saying yesterday, he said, look, a lot of acoustic paneling that people get, such as what I've got here in my office, is really not good for home theatres because it absorbs too much sound. And if you're watching this and you're techie like me, you've probably got a bit of an understanding that sound travels in waves and it bounces off surfaces, and then soft surfaces absorb it and hard surfaces bounce it back. And you end up with, in any sort of sound controlled room, lots of different waves bouncing around the room. So a huge amount of what they were doing was, how do you control where those waves go? So particularly once you end up with speakers all around you. And the guy actually started off by explaining, and this was probably most valuable to Charlotte and our project manager there. I had a reasonable grasp of this. He said, look, we had, for the longest time, it'd be like 5.1 audio, where you'd have 5 channels. You'd have a center and most of your voices. And so on would come from there. You'd have a couple of fronts, a couple of backs, and you'd have a sub somewhere. And for the most part, the subs are not particularly directional, I thought, until we got on the next thing I'll talk about. And then we moved along and we got to things like eventually Dolby Atmos. And now Atmos has got sound in the ceiling as well. In fact, what I was saying, like, I was aware of Atmos. We don't have that in what we have at the moment. We literally just have 5.1 sound. What I started learning is that previously, when you had that 5.1 sound and tracks for movies and things that get mastered, you would have like literally these 6 different tracks, and they'd play through the 6 different speakers. But now for Atmos, he said what they're doing, because especially depending on the size of the room, you'll have more speakers along the side and more across the roof. So the setup we were in yesterday, which I think is probably commensurate with the way we'll go, had, I think, 4 speakers along the sides and probably 4 Atmos speakers across the top of the ceiling. And he said the way the mastering of the sound happens now is it's about positioning objects in the room. So when they master the track, also, incidentally, this is just me relaying my understanding. Excuse me. And I will have all parts of this completely wrong. So he said, the way they master it now is they will, let's say it's a helicopter flying overhead was his example. They will position in the track the fact that there is an object and this is where the object needs to be, and then all of the audio processing will figure out what sound to put to what speakers based on the design of the room. So if you end up possibly having 12, 16 speakers or something in the room, then all of your audio processing is taking the instructions of where the object should sound like it's in the room and then sending the right instructions to the right speakers. So, wow, that's cool. That's really, really cool. So, where do we go next? One of the other things that I was curious about said, look, most of the stuff we watch, probably like most of you, is via a streaming media box. We have an Apple TV. So last night, it's like, we're like, okay, were we going to go out to dinner? No. Maybe we'll just stay home or watch a movie. So, okay, cool, Apple TV. What do we want to watch? Bam, go. But then when you have a really cool movie setup like this, home theater setup like this, you realize that the definition of the sound and the definition of the picture to get the most out of the money you put into a setup like this is very different to what Apple streams down in their super compressed audio and video formats. And in fact, the guy was saying, look, the audio formats that Apple streams are actually pretty good. The video formats have a lot more compression that you start to see in higher end home theater setups. And he said, look, yeah, just as an example, and I forget the name of it, he said that there is a service where you can you can buy hardware and buy a subscription such that when movies are released, let's say they all come out in America first because America, when they come out there, you can pay to get it streamed down to your end as well and reproduce it in the highest possible quality. And it's only about $5,000 a movie. Can you imagine going, it's like, hey kids, what do you want to watch tonight? The newest bloody Jurassic Park, whatever it is. Yeah, $5,000. So we're not going to do that one. That just seems stupid. I did actually, so he played several different movies that just highlighted different things about the audio. So we saw a bit of Top Gun, which of course is always epic, and a couple of others. I can't remember. The Greatest Showman with Hugh Jackman, because a lot of audios and vocals and the differences between the highs and the lows and sounds, etc. And I said, look, I'm just curious to see what does it look like on an Apple TV, because he was playing all these on a Blu-ray disc. Now, I cannot remember the last time I put a Blu-ray disc into a machine because we've had streaming. And in a way, this feels very, very backward, right? In fact, I'm quite sure I legally backed up all of my Blu-ray discs into my Plex instance and I threw them out because I just didn't want stuff hanging around. So to go and be putting a disc in a player, it's just like, really? So anyway, he played the latest Deadpool Wolverine, the fight section at the back towards the end with all of the other pools. I have seen it before. And it looked and sounded fantastic to my eyes and my ears. And I sort of said to the guy, like, I'm sure you're sitting there seeing everything that is wrong with this. But for me, as a complete home theater numpty, I'm like, this is amazing. Now, maybe that should influence the design, and we don't pay for the projector that's like stupid money. We pay for the one that's like half stupid money or something like that. He did say the video processing units that they put in theaters like this do a lot of work with the video that comes out of that Apple TV box. Again, I'm going to get all the figures wrong here, but it was something to the effect of it adds like a 2 millisecond. And incidentally, this guy is very much one of us, right? He knew what Home Assistant was, which was fantastic. But geeky, nerdy person who's obviously just very good at building home theaters that win lots of awards as well. 2 millisecond latency delay, and it was something like some crazy number of processing it can do on the fly to sharpen pixels and smooth stuff up and whatever else. Let me have a look at the comments and then I'll go on before I get lost here. Stefan says Dolby Atmos is awesome. Yeah, it sounded epic. I'll talk about the other really cool thing this theater did that I'd never heard of before in a moment. Milford says, my understanding of 3D sound engineering is it just has a couple of speakers and sends out slightly different timings to fool the brain into 3D sound source. Stefan says, proper surround has an array of speakers where their position is measured and stored in the audio processor, and it can then send out correct sounds with correct timings and filters, all to make the sounds genuinely feel like it's coming from behind you or the other sides. Stefan, you may know much more than I thought you knew as well. So maybe when we stop talking about Have I Been Pwned, we should talk about this. I was actually saying to the guys, like, when you win these awards, and again, if you look at the chat here, you'll see there's a link to the website and all of these sort of cool awards. And some of these are international. They just won like, and I'm not sure how many different award series there are and how significant it is. But one of these was like world's best theatre for the price point. And I think he said that particular price point was about 250,000 Aussie dollars. Put that in US dollars, it's about 160, I think, US thousand, which is not in this realm an expensive setup, but apparently it just like nailed all of the audio measurements they do, because in order to win these prizes, there's like just a huge amount of like highly technical digital sampling of sounds in different positions in order to establish that the room has been designed just perfectly such that no matter where you're sitting, the sound is perfect and it's not, I don't know, reverberating or sounding weird, or that's my technical explanation. Stephen, so he's been a semi-home theatre geek for you. Oh, geez. Okay. I should have put that in your CV, mate. All right. James says, you'll never make that side-by-side comparison in your home theatre. Barely notice if you definitely weren't at home. I'm not sure if you're talking about, James, the Apple TV content versus other content. But going back to that, I kind of philosophically feel that the way to watch movies these days is you turn on your streaming box and you just play it. I do not want to get to the point where I'm buying discs or paying ridiculous amounts of money for another streaming service where you need to like pre-order it and then it downloads it all. It just seems counterintuitive to the way we live today. Anyway, my point with the Deadpool thing that was playing on the Apple TV, it would have been interesting to hear that back to back, exactly the same thing on, like, let's say a Blu-ray disc that didn't compress the audio down to the extent that it does on the Apple TV or the video. So that would have been curious. I'm sure you can line that up. Seven says had a proper 7.1 Dolby Digital pre-Atmos and TXS certified amplifier about 15 years ago. Didn't have a high SAF, spouse acceptance factor. Still wondering what audio thing this was at the time. All right. Well, the SAF on this one yesterday was actually very good because Charlotte was like, that was awesome. Like, that just changes the way you watch TV or watch movies. Now, one of the things, and you will probably know this already, Stefan, was, and I'm going to make sure I get the term right here. There you go. Was apparently one of the things that is now quite big in home theaters, and what they've done here is what they referred to as waveforming, where I'm going to get this completely wrong. The way they've done it was effectively behind the big screen. Now, incidentally, going back to, I think it was James's points about a 100-inch TV or something. One of the problems with a massive TV that is in a OLED LED kind of thing is you cannot put speakers behind the screen. So when you look at theaters like those on the page I was just referring to, those big screens have these speakers behind them and they broadcast through the screen because it's a cloth screen, right? So it's actually a very, very good point of why you don't see those sorts of TVs. Stefan will correct me if I'm wrong, but in a home theater setup. So imagine you took the screen away. There are multiple subwoofers behind the screens sending waves of sound down past the seats, and then other subwoofers at the back that could then send sound waves back out to counteract the waves such that they didn't bounce back from the walls and hit you from behind and then sound like it was reverberating or something to that effect. So that was the way it was explained. And I sort of went, oh, in my mind, I can picture, I can certainly picture waves at the beach. And if the tide can't come out and then the tide's coming back in and the waves meet just perfectly, then it's just flat and you don't hear anything. And apparently this whole wave forming thing, I feel like somewhere on that website there was an explanation of wave forming, is a massive part of that sound. Now, part of the problem, if I'm devil's advocating this, is when you walk into a setup like that, it sounds awesome, but I'm pretty sure that if I walked into a setup, I found the waveforming link on that website, I'm pretty sure if I walked into a setup that was, let's say, a quarter of the price, I'd walk in and I'd also go, that sounds awesome. And it's a little bit, even when you buy a new PC, right? It's like, where is the sweet spot? Like, I'm upgrading, whatever I upgrade to is going to be awesome. Like, if I spend twice as much, I'm probably not going to get twice as much back because there's this law of diminishing return stuff. James Stefan says, waveforming sounds expensive. This makes sense from a physics perspective. So if you have a look at the link I just sent, what is waveforming? A giant leap forward in the field of bass management and performance in home theaters. Trinov's patented waveforming technology is a radical new approach and the best solution for the two main challenges we face as professional cinema designers when considering room acoustics and in particular bass. Anyway, it goes on and on and on, and I probably actually need to read this properly, but it's stuff like seat to seat bass consistency. Like, how do you make sure it's consistent across the seats? Tight, fast and punchy bass. I need to read all this and watch some stuff, because I'm sure that if I saw like the scientific diagrams of the waves and the cancelling out, etc. But I mean, this, they've got an image in here that's got way more speakers than what I think we'll ever need. But what's that? There must be like 7 speakers behind the screen and then 8 at the back of the room. Now that's also a largish theatre with like 3 tiers and 6 seats across, and you got like 18 seats in this theatre. So, So I think that The fun thing is for me is I'm realizing that there's this other space of technology where I thought it was, you know, my knowledge was like this, small hand signals, like listening later. And then I knew that there was like this outside of that larger hand signal. And now I'm learning that it's actually a massively, massively scientific thing. So where we are at the moment, in fact, what's kind of cool, if you have a look at the link I just sent, and you have a look at the picture with the seats in it, and there's like it's almost like a blue wave, or I guess that's the screen, but the waves coming through the screen towards the seats, and you have a look at the wall, you can see the wall sort of has these two layers, and I don't think that's just either sides of the frame on the wall. But earlier on I was saying, even the construction of the room is like a room within a room. It's not just a normal plastered room. Wayne says, the video I linked to above talks about Trinov. Where did you link to that? I can't see that, Wayne. Did you drop that in, or did it get binned? Drop it in again, mate. I'd like to read that, or watch that later on. So where we're at the moment is, first thing is I said, well, how many people do you want to sit in there? So, oh, that sounds like an obvious question. I'm not sure, because then the bigger it gets, because I sort of said the bigger it gets, the better it will sound, but the more it will cost, because you end up not just with more speakers, but then if you have a bigger screen, then you need a higher end projector to get enough light onto the screen. So we're trying to find that sweet spot. But that's pretty important, because obviously that then needs to go to the architect who's designing the building, because he needs to know how big it is. And it's not just the theatre as well, because then there's the question of, they said, look, really you end up with, like, I forget the word, but it's almost like an airlock into it. So you have like a two-door kind of system. He said what people often do is, you don't want to have things like, because I was like, oh, well, where do you put the drinks? Can we have a fridge at the back? He's like, yeah, you don't want to put that in the theatre, because you end up with so much bass that it will rattle around glasses and things. So what you can do is, as part of this airlock, you have like a door, you enter, maybe it's a very small entry, but you have your fridge and your stuff there, and maybe you have your server rack there. Yeah, because I'm thinking about moving stuff as well. And then you go through the other door, and then you're in there. So it's not just that room, it's the outside dependencies, and even things like the air conditioning. So, you can't end up with a situation where any of the air from the air conditioning is coming down between the projector and the screen, because it's a little bit like seeing heat haze on a road. And of course, you can't hear it at all. Well, you shouldn't be able to hear it all. So that's got to be designed in. So thanks, Wayne. I can see that YouTube link now. So hey, what I'll do for everyone's sake, let me go to YouTube, search for that. And because I am a mod, I can then paste that in. And everyone who's interested can watch this later on. Why didn't that come up? Oh, no, I know how to do this. I know how to YouTube. Because I can go to somewhere like there, and then I can just change that ID at the end. Oop, there we go, got it. I built the dream gaming setup. So I assume that's the one, so I'll drop that into, because it seems to have some audio related stuff. Don't be put off by the title. Okay, there we go. Alistair says, I've seen a server room in a YouTuber's house. Had space for a few full-sized racks. Yeah. Well, one of the... Stefan said I should be there for the Grand Theatre opening. Yeah, for the Theatre Grand. Yes, actually, I'm going to chat to you about that offline. I have some thoughts about that. One of the things that I'm thinking about is, recently when we rebuilt our garage, and I built like a dedicated server rack space in there. So I've got a server rack it's about three-quarter. It's about three-quarter height, maybe 2/3 height. I don't know. And that made sense there, because that's where all the patch cables from the wide Ethernet backbone terminate. But the problem is, the garage gets too warm. There's no air conditioning in there. We live in a hot environment, and I'm constantly running fans to keep everything cool. And so far, nothing in there has died, which is fantastic. So I think I've got enough cooling in there, but it's not ideal. Also, as awesome as it is that this house has got a wide Ethernet backbone, it was done 20 years ago, it's Cat 5. So when I'm sitting here in my office and I've got the freaking huge data breach that I'm processing, and then the server racks down there and my NAS and backups and everything else, and I'm having to go over Cat5 and unlimited. What's Cat5 limited to? About gigabit. I feel that. So what I kind of want to do, I think the theatre's going to end up somewhere over there. I'm talking to the Sparky about, can we run fiber from there to a switch somewhere in my office, and then what we'll do is I'll just leave one switch down there where all the Ethernet terminates for the existing house, because we're still going to have something there that joins it all up together, because we've got access points in so many different places. So we'll just leave one switch there, and then we'll put in like a full rack height, or depending on how much gear we need for this theatre, a couple of racks or something, and then we'll put all that over there. We'll fibre it to here. We'll Cat5 backbone it back to all the other switches that can do Cat5. That's fine for all the access points and the cameras. And then I'll have fibre from my PC. It's a big job. James says, half the Aussies I know have to cool their phones if they do a long live stream. Australia's a phone melting, apparently. The number of times, of course, they're all black, aren't they? The number of times I leave this heat-absorbing colour sitting there on the couch outside, and then the sun comes up, and I go back out 10 minutes later, and it's like, oh, shit, I got the thermometer thing again. Steven says, fibre sounds a bit like overkill. Yes, it does. Now's the time to do it, right? Okay, so anyway, that is what we're doing with the theatre stuff. So yeah, it's pretty wild. I think that we are looking at a project that's going to take about a year and a half. I really think that we're looking at August next year, not just for the theatre, but for everything else that we're doing there, which is a massive amount of time and work. Why am I doing this? Yeah. Charlotte's idea. Where were we? What's next? Some comments here before I jump on the next bit. Stefan says, fibre is not overkill when you have 10 gigabit internet connection. Yeah, well, we don't have that. We do have reliable gigabit now. For the longest time, I got so much shit for having poor internet here, and I wouldn't be able to get more than about 100-something megabit if the wind was blowing the right way. But now we do actually have pretty reliable gigabit, and if I'm fair, it's very, very rare that we need anything more than that, because let's say it's a massive data breach. So recently I had someone send me 10 terabytes worth of steel logs, and it took days to download, and on my 1 gigabit connection, the download was maxing out at like 200 megabit because I was throttled by something else upstream. So, having more than gigabit is awesome. But yeah, you got to have services that are going to support it. So says, should ask Lars for some of his Ubiquity gear, point-to-point gear. I actually have exactly the same stuff as Lars sitting here in my cupboard. I forget what they call it, but I've got several of those sitting there because I was thinking about installing them some of the other day, and then I found a better way. So no, I have that gear, but when it's your own property and we're digging shit up all over the place anyway, there's definitely no need to do that wirelessly. Elsa says, 18 months, have you never seen Grand Designs? The worst thing is that some of you, like Stefan, work from home. Many of you probably do what I did for so long, and you work from an office. And each day you get up and you go to the office and you get a break from all the stuff in your house, which has pros and cons, and then you come home and you pick up the home life again. When you solely work from home, when we're not traveling to the other side of the world, you never get a break from it. And I am dreading a year and a half of non-stop construction noise, and then the other stuff we've got to do in this house as well, tradies coming and going, appointments, people haven't turned up on time, noises in the background. All I want to do, I got this code in my mind, I think I figured out how to do it. All I want to do is go downstairs and get a coffee. Hey, can we ask you a question about, now I've just completely forgotten exactly the perfect algorithm I had to solve this particular problem. So I'm dreading that. All right, speaking about dreading things, let's talk about resellers. Should we ban resellers from Have I Been Pwned? Now, actually, interesting fun fact first. I did a little a quiet experiment by posting this question yesterday. So I posted a question to Twitter and to Blue Sky. Now, I said, I'm seriously considering just an outright ban on resellers buying Have I Been Pwned subscriptions for customers. It's just constant dramas, support overhead, obnoxious responses, and confusion. What are customers actually getting from resellers other than massive price markups? Now, I posted that. How long ago was that? 8:50 a.m. Did I post that yesterday morning? When was I angry? Yeah, okay. So that is bang on 20. When was I angry? That was bang on 24 hours ago. Now, this tweet has been seen 68,000 times. We've had 56 responses to it, 27 retweets. I've had a lot of engagement. Just for curiosity, I also posted it to Blue Sky. I've had 3 responses. And none of them, frankly, added much to the conversation. Now, I appreciate I've only got, what's that, 13,500 followers on Blue Sky, but I have so consistently gotten shit for not putting all the same stuff everywhere. And I'm like, look, the engagement levels are just very different. It's just not necessarily where all the people are, and people haven't been very happy about that. But here, that was my little silent experiment, and it has kind of made the point. I want Blue Sky to be successful. Please understand that that's not where the people are. Not yet, anyway. Now, I'm going to explain some background here, and I've been chatting to Stefan about this as well. Firstly, let me just define reseller in this context, because there's a difference between a reseller and an MSP. Maybe it's better just to explain the MSP first. So an MSP, a managed service provider, will often provide a range of value-added services to an organization. So let me give you an example. When I was working at Pfizer, 14 years at Pfizer, we might go to a company who would develop us an application. And as part of developing that application, there'd be various other services that they need to bring in. And they'd build the application and they'd bundle in the services. Some of those services may have subscriptions. And they might then manage that, and they charge us a monthly or an annual fee or something like that. And they bundle the whole thing together. Now, if they had to build an application for Pfizer that had Have I Been Pwned in it, and they bought one of the subscriptions, and then they've charged the customer for that subscription as part of the whole service, no problems with that at all. A reseller has all the worst bits of that and none of the good bits of that. Now, we had those at Pfizer as well. But a reseller would be an entity whose sole purpose is to simply purchase the product that you could purchase yourself and charge a lot more money for it. There are reasons for that. There are obviously reasons for it because they exist. Those reasons are usually things like, let's say it was Pfizer, and I won't name the reseller we always use because they're the ones that make the most requests of us. Have I been pwned? So I know them from both sides. But we would go to this one reseller, and every single time we needed to buy something, they'd add it to the bill, and then they'd give us like a monthly bill. And the argument was always, well, it just means that we don't have to go through the whole sort of vendor onboarding thing, which is a dumb argument. Because a lot of vendor onboarding is things like security assessments, which who cares what the vendor's security posture is or the reseller's security posture? It's the service that you're consuming at the other end that matters. If our Have I Been Pwned security posture is absolute rubbish, the reseller having a good one doesn't fix that problem at all. So the reseller would just sit there and bundle everything up into this one sort of point of contact, buy everything else from the original service, and then very often we'd either pay more for it or the service provider would get less and the reseller would get a cut. The resellers don't do this for free. Now, let me explain why I'm so worked up about this. And I have the figures now as well. So I'm going to give you the figures. This is going into a blog post, which if I finish writing this and it feels good, is going to go out and explain why we banned resellers. My gut feel was that we had an incommensurately high amount of support allocated to resellers as compared to everyone else. And I finally just lost my shit with it yesterday. And there's a good reason for it. So we had a customer who had purchased through a reseller, and it looks like the reseller had miscommunicated something to the customer, and then things had sat for ages, and then the customer came back and logged us a ticket because we don't do support through resellers. There's no point a reseller saying, I've got a customer, their API key isn't working, or they keep getting 429 too many requests. yeah, can you please help? There's no point in them sitting in the middle having that discussion backwards and forwards, particularly not when it is a discussion. You know, have you tried this? Did you do that? What about the other thing? So after the reseller sells the product and gets their cut, they're out of the picture, and any support goes direct to the end customer, who's the one who wanted the service in the first place. So long story short, this customer had effectively gone for several months having paid for something from the reseller, not gotten the answers they needed from the reseller, and had then been angry at us. And then they'd wanted a refund for some portion of the period of time. And there was something else as well. But anyway, they were cranky. And I was sort of chatting with Charlotte. She must have spent an hour writing this reply to the end customer, trying to explain how this wasn't something that we'd done wrong, a problem with the reseller, so on and so forth. And I ended up just losing my shit and going, like, this is ridiculous. Let's figure out what proportion of our sales are to resellers, what proportion of our time spent is for resellers. I know what my gut feel is. We'll look at it all and then we'll make a decision on it. So here are the answers to that. This is in a draft blog post at the moment. Oh, incidentally, how much do you think a reseller marks up the price of the service? Now, keeping in mind, so we have a service that starts at $3.95 American, which is more and more Australian dollars these days. Great for us. Thank you, Trump. $3.95. Now, we say to resellers, we will not sell through resellers the Pwned 1 and Pwned 2 subscriptions. We only do Pwned 3 and Pwned 4, the two largest subscriptions, because there's overhead on us every time. It doesn't make sense to do that for $3.95. So I'll only sell the two largest ones. Very often resellers say to us, what's our reseller discount? We'll go, well, you don't get a discount. Look, this is the product. If you want the product, you go to the website and you pay for the product. Just because you're then going to sell it onto someone else and you want to take a cut for doing nothing, no, we're not going to give you a discount. So when we sell, the example I've got here is when we're selling a Pwned 4 subscription at an annual one at US $1,100, and the price went up after this, but that's another story, $1,100, we had one occurrence of a reseller logging a ticket where they accidentally included the conversation that they were having with the end customer, the customer that actually wanted our product in the first place. Our $1,100 product, which covers all of the infrastructure costs, Stefan's costs, my costs, Charlotte's costs, all the time we spend processing data breaches, all of the effort that goes into running this service, that $1,100, they marked up to $2,544. It's a 131% price markup for nothing. And that it pisses me off, but it doesn't really take anything away from us either. It just pisses me off. So massive, massive markup. Now, we then went through and had a look at the proportion of our subscriptions that come from resellers. Now, what we found is for Pwned 4, that highest category, 4.9% of our current active subscribers came via a reseller. So less than 5%. It's a very small amount. So, you know, one way of looking at it would be to say, would we be willing to burn, if we say no resellers, would we be willing to burn 4.9% of the subscribers we have on that tier? Quite possibly. Now, the Pwned 3 tier was 0.5%. So basically, there are no resellers buying that Pwned 3. It was all Pwned 4. But then if we look at it from the perspective of the total subscriber base, resellers account for 0.86% of all subscriptions. 0.86%. In other words, that is 1 in 116 of our subscriptions are via a reseller. So keep that in mind. We then went through and figured out the number of tickets and the amount of support. Now, where do we get to there? Oh, that's right. I haven't updated my figures here. It was, oh no, I did. I put it down the bottom. This is what a draft blog post looks like. It was 15 I think it was about 15%, but there was an important nuance here. Here you go. When we ran the numbers, we found that tickets raised by resellers, as still a draft, accounted for 15.6% of all tickets so far in 2025. That alone is not a large number because 18 times, that alone is a large number because 18 times more than the share of customers have brought them in. So 0.86% of our subscriptions are resellers, but 15.6% of our support is resellers by volume of tickets. However, here's the big nuance. A lot of the tickets that we get, I've got an example in here. I like this. Hello, I want to subscribe to your service, but I need a W-9 so I can create a vendor in our system. Can you email me that? Now, W-9 is an American tax form. It's actually not the right form for, for a foreign entity such as us. They want a W-8BNE, things you learn about American tax. But we have a macro. So when a query like this comes in a ticket, Charlotte sees that, she goes down to macro, she types tax, she clicks on the right one, macro automatically replies. It is a 30-second response. Her estimate is that on average, the amount of time spent replying to non-reseller tickets is 1 minute. Something like that, 30 seconds. Other things, short written response. But it's only a minute. Conversely, I just mentioned the one yesterday, she spent an hour on this reseller related issue. When we averaged it out, she feels pretty adamant that she spends about 5 minutes on average for a reseller. So we now have a situation where resellers are like 0.86%, I think I said, of our volume of customers, but they're 15.6% of our tickets by volume, and each one of those takes 5 times as long to process. So in other words, you come out to a very even amount of support effort spent on reseller customers versus non-reseller customers, yet one of them is 116 times more prevalent than the other. You see where I'm going with this? So our view here is that in all likelihood, probably this coming week, I think we're just going to ban resellers. I think we're just going to kick them off altogether. It'll help my anger management issues if I get rid of resellers. That's the sense we have. I think we're just going to ban them altogether. And of that 0.86% of customers that have previously come through via reseller, there will be a portion of them when they have no other choice that will just go and buy direct. And this is what would happen at Pfizer. Please go and purchase through a particular reseller of choice. If we got to the point where we literally could not purchase the product through them, we'd fall back to a credit card. Given enough pressure, I think many of those 0.86% will go and purchase direct. So I'm not actually too worried about this. I'm not worried about like cannibalizing our market. And the other thing is, and I've got it here in this draft blog post, when Stefan and Charlotte and I were in Oslo a couple of months ago, and you remember this, mate, we were sitting there at the kitchen table in this Airbnb, we're saying, look, this for all of us is very much a lifestyle project, lifestyle business. It is a business. We have to pay tax. Where we're doing something that we think is impactful and meaningful in the world. We're deliberately keeping it small with just the 3 of us. We don't want to hire more people. I don't want to have other responsibilities. And it's giving us the flexibility to work the way we do and work from anywhere and be able to sit here and talk about home theaters and random shit without being accountable to someone else and having to make this into a bigger thing. You know, some people in the responses here were like, just charge a crazy amount for it and it'll fix the problem. No, it doesn't fix the problem. Whilst there is the work to do, we can't do that with just the 3 of us. It's not about the money. It's about being able to run this thing the way that we want to run it. And I don't want to be running it answering inane, stupid questions like some of these. I mean, here's a good example. We get this all the time from resellers. So pretty much annually, it is annually. Annually, we readjust prices. Now, incidentally, and this feedback's come back a lot, in part due to this question and other things previously as well. we do an absolutely terrible job of pricing this thing. It is priced ridiculously low for what it is. When you've got Fortune 500 companies paying $1,000 something a year for access to this sort of data information. We know that. We know it's priced badly, but we wanted to make it as easily accessible as possible. So we've done a rubbish job of that, but each year we look at it and we bump it up a bit. Same amount that you get your Netflix or your Spotify or something bumped up, usually somewhere between 10 and 20%. And time again, we'll have a reseller come back. Here, I've screen capped one here. Thank you for sharing, Charlotte. In review, it appears that the cost increased from $1,115 license to $1,370 licenses for this renewal. That is nearly a 20% increase in cost. Company name cannot approve the renewal with this cost increase. Can your team remove the uplift to help get this approved? Meanwhile, they're marking it up 130 something percent. So they're like, we put all of this effort into building and running something and make it as lean and efficient as possible. They mark it up 136% or whatever it was I said before. And when we move the needle a little bit more, a tiny bit more towards the price that they're charging, we get pushback. And it makes me want to beat them with a mouse. I'm just like, go away. So anyway, that's what I think we might do. Yeah, like Stephen says, hey, Troy, can you not eat into our profit? Thanks, reseller. It's just constantly, and I've asked Charlotte to try and find as many good examples as I can for the blog post. It's the constant obnoxiousness of resellers, which really, really bugs me. And it's dumb as well. Like, okay, and I know this is a template and everything, but there's a 9-point questionnaire that Charlotte's gotten from this one reseller who's the most prevalent one that sends us all this stuff over and over again. We need a renewal quote for the above order. Please provide the... You want to know what it costs? Go to the website. It tells you there. That's what you'll get charged when it renews. 9 things they want. Verify the maintenance dates on the quote. Any contracts, agreements, or serials associated with the license not listed. Inform us if this is on auto renewal. Inform us if we need to provide 30 days notice prior to cancellation. Inform us if the licensing product is discontinued and needs to be upgraded. Please send terms and conditions and use the license agreement for this product. Have the terms and conditions changed the previous term. Can we co-term new licenses? Can we add license individually? And then number 9, what is the return cancellation policy? What do you mean return? It's a subscription. How do you return your Netflix subscription, mate? It's the same thing. You can see it just upsets me. It's got to. I've never found a reseller that was worth it, but you still use them, don't you, to report your ROI? So what I'm thinking is, in all likelihood, we're going to agree to kill them. I've got to go back to the lawyers then and say in our terms and conditions, how do we phrase it such that MSPs, like I described earlier, are still fine, but resellers are not. And then I'm going to email every single one of our customers personally who's bought via reseller and explain that when the renewal comes up, they won't be able to get it through a reseller. Here's a link to the blog post why with all the examples of shitty reseller behavior. And then when the resellers log tickets and complain, I'm going to reply to them. I just don't care about the money. I really don't. What have I missed in the comments? James made a good comment. If they don't make your life easier on the customers or the customer's life easier, then what's the point? Look, I think there obviously is a point because a handful of customers have used them. But it's a bad point. And I say this having been on the side of the customer using resellers before as well. It's a bad point. Jane says, I might have regex look for keys and support ticket just for submission, pop up a recommended answer for the tax form. I know we all get a little bit hyped up in the AI as well, but I really feel that this is one of these things that could be very well AI serviced too, where for questions like that, like the W8 or W9 as they phrase it, tax form, that's a really easy thing today for the machines to read, interpret, and respond to. We did actually set up our first autoresponder the other day, and I'm going to see how many more tickets we've had from this. But there is one of these privacy tools called Mine, and Mine don't quote me on this. This is my assumption, but it looks like you give mine access to your email account, like you do Google OAuth Magic, whatever, and it gets into your Gmail. It goes through your inbox. It finds all the various services and things you've signed up for, and then it sends mail from your mail account, so from your name, to all of those services asking for your data to be erased. And we suddenly started getting, I mean, here you go. I've just found 3 that now have been auto-responded to just today. I'll read out what it says here. There's a subject. Have I been pwned data erasure request from person's name, request, and then there's a code in here. Hi, have I been pwned, in brackets, have I been pwned.com, just in case we didn't know. I'm person's full name, and I previously used your service. I'm requesting that you erase all the personal data you hold about me. In my previous interactions with your organization, I shared some of my personal data with you. I received an email that indicates you hold personal data about me on 2021 April 08. Weird date format, dude. I'm using mine, a data privacy app, to discover services you hold about my data and reduce my online exposure. I used mine's technology to send this request from my inbox. So the issue that we have with this is that, of course, we honor data erasure requests, but one of the pieces of guidance we got from, remember John Elliott, Scott? John Elliott, many years ago, a data protection officer of some repute, friend of Scott's and mine, gave us we paid him for some consulting work around the privacy stuff and have I been pwned. He said, look, what you should do with your opt-out feature is give people choices so that they have more control over how their data is managed. Obviously, no one can choose whether or not they're going to be a data breach or not, and then subsequently whether or not they flow through and have been pwned. But once it's there, you actually have 3 different ways of managing your data. Excuse me. So one is, yeah, just delete everything. Delete everything we have on the person. The problem is that if we delete everything that we have on the person, and then there's a new data breach, they could end up back in have I been pwned again. So let's give them another option, which says delete all the data breaches you have about me, but keep my email address, and if you see any other data breaches in the future, don't load them against me. Well, that's reasonable. There's a second option. And then there's a third option, which is keep my email address, keep all the data breaches against me, but don't make them publicly searchable. So there's your third option. So long and short, it is when someone emails us and says, I want to erase my data, we need to know which way they want to go. And this is why we've got a completely self-service tool. So this is a very long way of explaining what we've now done is created an autoresponder. And I tried getting in touch with the people at mine, didn't get a reply. So now every time one of these erasure requests comes in, Zendesk just automatically replies straight away. It says, here's the KB article that explains how to do it. Go over there and do it. And interestingly, it looks like we're getting, I don't know, 3 of these a day or something. Curiously, they look like they're all Indian names. So I'm not sure if they've done some big marketing campaign in India or something to that effect. Except this one. Scooby Box doesn't sound like an Indian name, does it? Doesn't sound like a name at all. Have I been pwned data erasure request from Scooby Box? So hopefully I didn't just dox someone there. Scott still works with him, John Elliott. Say good day to John. He's a good guy. We did a Pluralsight thing together. James says, if you use the API yourself to provide the service, you're also likely providing the support. Yeah, exactly. And this, I think this just goes back to the reseller thing. It's like we are providing all of the support. Yeah. Scott says, the problem is people having your data. So the solution is giving more people your data. Yeah, well, I know. And that's what feels a little bit icky about, frankly, about any service. I would never want to give any service full access, not just to read my mailbox. Jesus Christ, the amount of personal stuff everybody has in their mail, but then to go through and send mails under my ID, that just feels really, really icky. Really icky. But, you know, here we are. Look, I had something on the list here about data breaches this week. Let's just go through those quickly because there's a few here. One in particular that I thought was kind of noteworthy. There's another one I've just disclosed at the moment. and it's a legit one. Took me a bit to get in touch. Finally got the right person. They've got a SQL injection vulnerability somewhere that still appears to be active, and the guy's words to me in his response seems like a good could, for all I know, it could be a very young guy in this capacity. Well, I'm not very good at security issues. It looks like this time-based SQL injection issue. I'll let you know when we fix the vulnerability. Do you happen to have any suggestions where I can learn more? Pen testing, red teaming. It's like, this is a large enough company that they probably just need to go out and, I think this will be my suggestion, probably go out and get some help on this one. So anyway, that is not in Have I Been Pwned yet. It will be soon. The one that was quite interesting this week was related to Thermomix. Now, if you've never heard of Thermomix before, it's one of these do-it-all kitchen utilities. It can cook and it can cut and it can steam. And I've had a Thermomix for, I want to say close to 20 years now. And the reason why is a good friend of mine was like a rep for Thermomix. And Thermomix doesn't sell through the mainstream stores. They only sell through these reps. And it's a little bit Tupperware where someone comes to your house and gives you a demo. And these machines are, if we put it in US dollars, $1,500 or something, like they're not cheap. And I'd bought one from this friend many, many years ago. And then I bought a newer one, probably 4 years ago. And when I saw someone saying that Thermomix had a data breach, I was like, oh, here I go again. And it turned out that I wasn't in there, but the friend that had sold me the Thermomix was. And another common friend who I knew had one was. And it turns out that there's a Thermomix forum called Recipe World. And that's what got popped. Now, I had a bit of initial trouble getting in touch with Thermomix. But to their credit, once I found the right person, they got a disclosure notice out really quickly. I talked to a person like us, like a cool person, like an InfoSec person, and they were awesome. And it was immediately over Signal, here's PGP key, stuff like this. And it was all just handled really, really well. So, kudos for them for handling that. A little bit of a shame that for a forum, there's like physical addresses and phone numbers and dates of birth. Now, why you need that for a forum is just totally beyond me. Other stuff this week, 10,000 records from a Japanese soldering business. This might have been one of the ones where it's like, well, we're testing some stuff and Have I Been Pwned. It was on the backlog, it's small. Have you deployed that thing, Stefan? Just remember, before you go to bed, there's one thing you need to deploy while we're testing things. Just remembered. There was that one, similar one here, South Korean education platform called Point Campus. Betting site OneWin. I have a feeling I might have been talking about OneWin last week, but OneWin, 96 million records, but only 17% already in Have I Been Pwned, and a very small number of our subscribers there. And it seems to be a very Russian-centric service, and that does tend to limit the number of subscribers we have in an incident. DragonNet. Massive multiplayer online role-playing game, MMORPG. Oh, did I spell it wrong? Role-playing. Oh, I said RGP instead of RPG. No one noticed either. Anywho, that was out there. What else in the last week? Belgian Gaming News Forum, 9 lives. Now defunct. That was from 2014. I was definitely testing something then. Yeah, and that's about it. That's been the week in data breaches. Got a lot of other stuff on the backlog. Got a couple of massive Stealer logs that we're processing as well. We have also now pushed out a flag on the breach entity for is Stealer log. Now, this was in the works already. Someone requested this recently as well. Said, look, can you add a flag just because we want to handle Stealer logs a bit differently? So that's also now in the documentation that's live as well. So if you wanted to handle Stealer logs differently, and if you wanted to also see which breaches would then have a list of domains that the email address appears against from the Stealer logs, that's now there. Okay, so that is it for this week. I hope you found that interesting. If folks listen to this later on and you have ideas, theatre related, let me know. Stefan, I'm going to drop you a message and tell you some more stuff about that in just a moment too. So yeah, hey, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next week.